They are aware of your might and are afraid. You are not a regular human. You do not live a random life. You've been chosen. You've been called. You have a mission. They realized this from the start. They saw your potential. They observed your brilliance. And that is exactly why they wanted to stop you. But they overlooked one thing. Humans cannot change their fate. This is not a game. This is a combat waged on a hidden battlefield. Words become weapons. Thoughts become tactics. They have formed an alliance against you. They have tried every trick to disparage you, drain your energy, and stymie your advancement. But they couldn't extinguish the holy spark inside you. Your ascension is inescapable because genuine power is found inside, not beyond. Now is the time to make a decision. Either you surrender to your old connections and accept the story they have written about you, or you may awaken your inner warrior and shape your own destiny. Remember that nothing that gets in the way of a chosen one can endure forever. Now stand up, write 77 in the comments and keep going. The air was thick with unspoken hostility. An invisible tempest was brewing in the distance between them, eyes locked and jaws clenched. This was more than just a heated confrontation. It was the finding of a hidden reckoning. The long-awaited moment had come. The foundation of deceit had cracked, and what had previously been hidden in whispers and half-truths was now screaming into the darkness. There will be no more pretense or intentional avoidance. There was just the immediate, unfiltered outcome of lying. The silence before the first blow sounded louder than any accusation. It was inevitable, the kind of truth that does not sit quietly in the background, waiting for permission to be spoken. It forces its way outside, killing everything in its path. This wasn't about a single argument or a long-standing enmity. This was a reckoning that had been simmering under the surface, a fire in the making, and they were suddenly confronted with the consequences of what they had disregarded for so long. All that left was the impact of words failing, tempers boiling, fists flying, and speaking the language of what had not been stated. It didn't just involve one person. It was about the consequences of disclosure for those who had spent years avoiding it. This was a struggle that ran much deeper than flesh, a clash between truth and resistance in which misconceptions had nowhere to go. And the force at the heart of it all, incontrovertible and unshakable, was too strong to ignore. This is when the facade cracked. They realized they had no more control over what had been set in motion. The walls of deception had crumbled, and standing among the rubble, they felt the weight of their own actions, bearing down like an anchor. They thought they could contain and suppress it. We have enough distractions to obscure what was obvious. However, deception is a protracted process that cannot be stopped once it starts. The truth they feared had coiled around them, like chains tightening with each breath, with seconds spent rejecting what could no longer be ignored. It had never been about winning or losing. It had always been about how long they could delay the inevitable. There was no longer somewhere to run. The air was thick with silent rage, an invisible storm brewing in the space between them, eyes locked, jaws clenched. This was more than just a heated confrontation. It was the finding of a hidden reckoning. The long-awaited moment had come. The foundation of deceit had cracked, and what had previously been hidden in whispers and half-truths was now screaming into the darkness. There will be no more pretense or intentional avoidance. There was just the immediate, unfiltered outcome of lying. The silence before the first blow sounded louder than any accusation. It was inevitable, the kind of truth that does not sit quietly in the background, waiting for permission to be spoken. It forces its way outside, killing everything in its path. This wasn't about a single argument or a long-standing enmity. This was a reckoning that had been simmering under the surface, a fire in the making, and they were suddenly confronted with the weight of what they had fought for so long. All that left were impact words, frazzled tempers, flaming fists, and the language of what had gone unsaid. It didn't just involve one person. It was about the consequences of disclosure for those who had spent years avoiding it. If you are feeling an abundance of divine love in your heart, now is the time to share it. You may help spread God's blessings by clicking the super symbol. Click the thank you button on YouTube and donate $20 or more. This lovely present will touch not just your life, but the lives of many others. Each of you has a sacred place in God's grand plan via this platform, and your generosity will provide fruit for our prayers. Act now. Share your advantages to honor His kingdom. In God's loving hands, you were designed to do much greater things. May God bless you. This was a struggle that ran much deeper than flesh, a clash between truth and resistance in which misconceptions had nowhere to go. And the force at the heart of it all is evident. Unshaken was an overwhelming presence that could not be ignored. This is when the facade cracked. They realized they had no more control over what had been set in motion. The walls of deception had crumbled, and standing among the rubble, they felt the weight of their own actions, bearing down like an anchor. They thought they could contain and suppress it. We have enough distractions to obscure what was obvious. However, deception is a protracted process that cannot be stopped once it starts. The truth they feared had coiled around them, like chains tightening with each breath, with seconds spent rejecting what could no longer be ignored. It had never been about winning or losing. It had always been about how long they could delay the inevitable. There was no longer somewhere to run. The illusions they clung to were dissolving, revealing a reality they had long refused to face. The weight of deceit had reached its limit, and the truth was breaking through like sunlight through a storm. What seemed to be unshakable was shattering in front of their own eyes. The atmosphere had changed. What had been concealed couldn't remain hidden for much longer. The balance had been disrupted, and the consequences were no longer a remote possibility. However, a force is pressing in from all directions. Certain things may be postponed, but never avoided. This reckoning began long before they realized it. They believed that, like a candle in a glass box, the flame of truth might be drowned, controlled, or obscured by the winds of revelation. The divine fire cannot be contained. The Almighty's breath travels wherever it wills, and when it comes, it rips through the lies like a cyclone, destroying every illusion, shadow, and untruth that stood in the way of what was always intended to be revealed. You cannot silence what has been spoken into being by the very hand of creation. You cannot change a light that was created to shine. And now the light has appeared, cracking through the walls of concealment, tearing away the carefully crafted veils, unveiling what was always meant to be shown. There is no great silence that can disguise the inevitable. They tried. Oh, how! They tried to conceal the truth, pretending to create a grand illusion. Their version of events would be unchallenged. However, secrets, no matter how well hidden, ultimately surface. The undertone of suspicion has grown. Now the dam had burst. No more hushed conversations in peaceful settings. No more quiet movements behind closed doors. The words they spoke in the dark had become the stones that would lead to their demise. What they believed was safely buried has begun to surface in ways they cannot control. What they hated the most had arrived at their doorstep, and there was no turning it away. The walls they built for security have become a prison. They depended on the same structures, networks. They depended on the stories. They whirled slowly. Each one is moving underneath them, unstable, untrustworthy, and crumbling like sand between open fingers. The weight of exposure pressed down, crushing, unyielding, and inexorable. The reality had become too large and overpowering to ignore. Suddenly, everything dependent on illusion collapsed beneath the pressure, buckling under the weight of what was certain to come to light. They were certain they could play. Both sides murmur something in the dark and then declare something else in the light of day. Speak in two languages and walk with two faces, convincing the world that you are not who you are. However, there is a punishment for dishonesty. You cannot stand in the center of divine order and expect to navigate your way out. What they thought was brilliant was really a slow and intentional descent into their own demise. The moment they chose to go against what was right, they chose their way. When they opted to go against what was divinely intended, they faced the repercussions of their own conduct. The consequences of their choices are no longer only a personal issue. It is written all over their faces and can be felt in every location they go. Linger too long. Conversations are cut abruptly when they enter. Their formerly assured presence now seems uncertain, fractured, hesitant. People now perceive them differently. The image they presented is no longer believable. The authority they relied on has begun to dissolve, and no amount of control can comprehend what is already being taken away. It is not punishment. It's just the way things are. What is built on falsehoods will not endure. What is founded via deceit will not persist. The shaking has come. What remains will be based in reality. And you? You have not had to raise your hand. You did not need to force anything. The truth is not a battle to fight. It is an independent force that pervades every event, conversation, and change in the surroundings. You don't seek justice. Justice has already begun. You do not seek revenge. The divine has already accounted for every word said. Every stage was completed. Every deception is attempted. Like a tree planted by the river, you are not afraid of shifting winds. There may be storms and rain, but your roots go deep. The world may shake because it is anchored in something far larger than what can be seen. People may turn, and the clamor of accusations may intensify, but you remain firm, unshaken, and unmovable. Because when God plants anything, no storm, deceit, or opposition can destroy it. What is constructed with divine hands will stand the test of time. Seasons come and go, but the truth is permanent, and you were never meant to waver in the face of anything temporary. As a result, the current events do not terrify, excite, or disturb you, because there is no need to respond when you are in harmony with divine truth. The power is in pressing forward. The strength is in recognizing that the storm is merely clearing the way for something larger. And when the dust settles, the false voices become silent. When everything built on pretense breaks, the only thing left is what was always meant to last. They never anticipated the truth to fall through the cracks. They believed that if they covered enough land, controlled the right people, and said the right things at the right time, they might affect the outcome. However, they failed to see that truth cannot be manipulated. Truth is like a dawn. It always appears. Regardless of how long the night or how dark the illusion, light will arise. And what was hidden will be exposed for what it really is. Dear brothers and sisters, may God's peace be upon you today. I am here to remind you of a basic reality. Our existence is founded on God's divine purpose and is not influenced by earthly concerns. According to the Bible, whatever done with faith will be repaid to God with tremendous blessings. Luke 638. Like a big oak tree, our roots are deeply anchored in God's universal truth. His might protects every step and posture we take. You now have the opportunity to be a part of that gift. When you use the Super Thank You button and give $100, you will get a 100-fold return on your investment. They meticulously crafted their illusions, fabricating stories that fit their purpose and setting traps with words full of deceit. They prepared strategies, calculations, and arrangements, assuming that they might move undetected. But the invisible can see everything. The divine does not need whispers or confessions. Every concept, goal, and hidden movement has previously been accounted for. Simply ignoring deception will not make it go away. It accumulates. It evolves. And when the time comes, it collapses under its own weight. Now they can sense it. The relaxing part, the shift, the moment they lose control. And the same things they trusted to keep them safe are now working against them. Their chains have replaced the lies that formerly shielded them. The very people they sought to convince are suddenly seeing them with new eyes. What they once carried with assurance has become heavy with fear, because there is no firm foundation without truth. Like a river created by God, truth does not need permission to flow. It moves anywhere it pleases, reshaping landscapes, cut over the mountains, making the most durable stone into dust. Human-built dams cannot block what was always intended to break through. Divine justice cannot be stopped by any amount of scheming, plotting, or opposition. When the floodgates open and the weight of what has been hidden enters the world, nothing remains. Nothing can prevent it, because whatever the most lofty says will always be true. No force on earth, no deception, no manipulation can alter what was ordained before time started. They felt they had control over how things would finish. They assumed they could rearrange the pieces to their advantage. They strategized, chatted in secret, and devised their strategies under cover of darkness, certain that they had perfect control. However, deception can only go so far before meeting with something stronger. A lie may spread rapidly, but the truth does not. Truth is what lasts. And when the truth is revealed, it is uncompromising. It does not ask permission. It does not wait for greetings. It comes like a rushing flood, destroying every deceit, strategy, and carefully built illusion. And you never had to seek them. You've never had to fight, because the conflict was never yours. It was addressed before it ever began. The divine does not need protection. It speaks for itself. The truth does not need an army. It stands on its own. You were never meant to lower yourself to the ground and battle with falsehoods. You were never challenged to prove what was already clear. When carrying a light, darkness discloses itself. When you walk in divine might, every falsehood collapses under the weight of reality. They felt they could change the story, but the ink had already dried. They believed that if they responded quickly enough and controlled their voices, they could affect the outcome. But they overlooked one thing. What God has decreed cannot be reversed. What is set in motion by divine hands cannot be undone by human intentions. Suddenly, the ground underneath them trembles. What they've built is collapsing under the weight of their own deception, bearing down like a terrible burden. The words they spoke in private are now the ones that expose them. The same hands that used to deceive are now trembling as a result of their own acts. They can feel it now. The shift, the unraveling, the undeniable truth pouring through like the first light after a dark night. Their grip is slipping, their authority is eroding, and their influence is waning. They can detect how the air influences how eyeballs look at them, the way they talk. They no longer carry the same weight as previously, because false apologies and rushed explanations will not restore trust or respect. What is founded on lies will ultimately fail, and the time for pretending is done. And you continue to walk. You do not turn around to see them disintegrate. You don't waste time showing what is evident. Truth does not need effort to sustain. It stands on its own. You are not bothered by their demise since it was never a priority. Your attention is focused forward. Your call is superior. Your destiny was never in their favor, and their approval did not define your future. The closed door behind you is no loss. It was for protection. Those who turned down were not failures. They were a lesson. And the issue you never had to fight was not yours in the first place. It had already won before you entered the scenario. Like a man trying to hold back a torrent with his bare hands. They felt they could stop what was already in motion. They stood on the edge of the ocean, commanding the waves to recede. They felt that their words had power over something beyond their control. However, the tide does not listen to human words. It moves with more energy. Long before they were aware of their influence, they had created a miraculous rhythm. And now, as the water rises and the truth is revealed, people are beginning to understand. They've never fought you. They were fighting the inevitable. They were rejecting the inevitable. And no amount of protest, cunning, or deception can undo what is divinely decreed. They will learn in their own time that what they were fighting against was never just you. They imagined they were up against someone they could silence, manipulate, or control. However, they were resisting something far greater. They were attempting to gain control over something that was beyond their grasp. They stood in the way of an unstoppable force. And now, when the dust settles and the truth remains unshaken, they are forced to face what they tried so hard to avoid. The repercussions of their actions are no longer a hidden burden. It is genuine, tactile, and has undeniable force. The sentences they formerly said with ease now seem heavy on their tongues. Their former assurance has given way to skepticism. They see it in the way people look at them and how the air around them has changed. Conversations that formerly flowed smoothly now seem empty. Their formerly unshakable trust has vanished. It slides between their fingers like sand. Deception has an expiration date. It may last a season. It could be persuasive for a minute. The truth has always existed. The final say and truth are not made void. It makes no apologies for its entry. It does not hesitate to assert itself. And now, when it goes into effect, those who opposed it must embrace the reality they created for themselves. They demand control. They attempted to determine the words. They wanted to know what they saw, what was believed, what was recalled. But the moment they went against what was right, they sealed their own fate. Certain things cannot be rewritten. Deception cannot erase certain stories. And now they find themselves standing in the ruins of their own creation, looking at the shards of a foundation that was never designed to last. And you keep going because it was never your burden to carry. It was never your battle to fight. The truth does not need defenders. It does not need protection. It simply exists. And now it stands tall, propelled by the brief upheaval. You proceed not in response to them, but as an expression of your own self. Your steps are in order. Your purpose is clear. And while others cope with the consequences of their own actions, you remain steady. You were always meant to be here, not because you worked so hard for it. There's no resistance. No resistance. No amount of lying would change it, because God wrote the story, and no one can alter the ending when the divine moves. No force can hold it back. And as you go on, undisturbed by the carnage behind you, one thing is certain. Whatever was meant for you was always yours. A battle is unnecessary. There is no incentive to strive. Just miraculous alignment at the right time, putting you precisely where you were always meant to be. But you climb, not by force or punishment, not by proving yourself, but by just pursuing your path. The storm did not shake you. It exposed you. The dispute did not break you. It positioned you. Suddenly, everything falls into place just as it should. You go on, careless, unstoppable, and fully victorious. So you aren't distracted by what they say. I was unimpressed by their attempts to change the narrative, because what was built on untruth would eventually disintegrate under the weight of truth and truth. The truth is not hasty. Truth doesn't shout. Truth does not seek attention. It simply is. When everything else fails, it will be the last thing standing. It's time to distribute God's blessings by clicking the super thank you button on YouTube. With a $100 contribution or more, you may help him carry out his goal and join this sacred quest. Every payment is God's kindness, and I believe it will return to you greatly, far above your expectations. Remember that his protection and blessing are there in every step and contribution. You become a part of his divine plan. You are a tremendous, bright being, as solid as the big rock that saw God's miracles. Feel the benefits of your compassion in your soul, and light up the world with confidence and courage. Be blessed, and let the light of the Lord guide you. You go on, unmoved by their chaos or death, because you were never invited to stay in the ruins. You weren't meant to be swept up in their desperation. The moment they chose deception, they chose their destiny. And you keep going because what is ahead of you is greater than everything they tried to take from you. Your steps are in order. Your base is robust. And, while others strive to hold on to something that was never really theirs, you rise via divine alignment rather than force or retribution. What was intended to harm you has now become the same thing that has lifted you up. The hurricane didn't break you. It exposed you. The fight did not defeat you. It prepared you. And now, when the dust settles and the noise fades, just one thing remains. The purpose, promise, and destiny that was always yours to take on. They believed they could exist in both worlds, playing the loyal while betraying, and maintaining the appearance of honesty while participating in deception. However, international law cannot be influenced. When they decided to go against what was right, they created their own fate. The world around them was shifting, and their strength was fading like a light struggling against the wind. The eyes that had once admired them were now asking questions. Their ties were fragile, disintegrating with each passing moment. It was not retribution. It was the failure of their own strategy. No foundation based on falsehoods can exist eternally. Nothing needed to be pushed. The natural order was already in motion. The moment had come when silence spoke louder than confrontation, and the act of moving forward was more powerful than any rebuttal. No retaliation was necessary. The route had been chosen, and everything would unfold in its own time. While they struggled with the consequences of their actions, the path ahead remained clear and unobstructed. The actual transformation happens not during the tumult of revelation, but in the calm that followed, when truth reigns unabated, unshaken,